Ajnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurmilitan Jena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Gurave Gaura Chandraya Radhikaya Tadalaye Krishnaya Krishna Bhaktaya Tada Bhaktaya Namo Namaha Yam Pravajantam Anupeta Apeta Krityam Rapaino Viraha Katara Ajuhava Putreti Tan Maitaya Taravo Vinedus Tam Sarvabhutam Hridayam Munimanatosmi Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaivanarottamam Devim Saraswatam Vyasam Tato Jayamudirayat Bhaktya Vihina Parada Lakshay Kiptashtakamari Tarangamadye Kripamai Tvam Sharanam Prapanna Vrinde Namaste Charanara Vendam Tave Vasmi Najivami Tvaya Vina Iti Vigyaya Radhe Tvam Nayanam Charanandike Pancha Kalpatarubhascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. So today is actually the first day of Sri Navadvip Dham Parikrama, and we will begin this day with a walk down to the Ganga, Mother Ganga, where we will do Sankalpa, our vow. And first we begin by offering our most humble obeisance unto the lotus feet of our beloved Gurus, unto Sri Guru Pada Padmanita Lila Bhavishta, Om Vishnu Padasta Tarsat Sri Srimad Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada and Sri Guru Pada Padmanita Lila Bhavishta. Om Vishnu Padasta Tarsat Sri Srimad Bhaktivedanta Narayan Goswami Maharaj and our exalted Upanuga Guru Varga. So yes, anyone who has been to Sri Navadvip Dham for Parikram under the guidance of Srila Bhaktivedanta Narayan Goswami Maharaj or his associates, disciples, and others will remember this path that we take. We are at one end of Koladweep, where we have the Sri Keshav Gaudiya Math, very near the bridge that crosses over to Sri Godrumadweep, right? And we walk out of our mat and then we turn left. And then we walk up a small road for some ways, and then there's a T-junction, and we make a right. And after we make a right, there are a lot of little stalls, little shopkeepers there, right? That's the beginning. There's one stall on the right where devotees always go to get snacks like samosas or cheesecake or paratha, right? Very nice fellow there. He told me his cheesecake recipe. They do it a little differently there, right? With paneer and semolina. Then we go to another T-junction. On the left is a small little mandap, and then we make a left. And if you go on that road straight down, you'll go into the center of town. But we go for some ways, and then we make a right. And then on both sides are fields. And we continue down. We come to a shaded area, a lot of trees. There's a small temple for Gaurnitai on the left. And then in front of us is a large sandy bank and the Ganga River. And we usually go there early in the morning, very early. And oftentimes we've gotten there early enough where the sun is just rising across the river on the other side, on the eastern side. and the river is still somewhat shrouded by fog, and it covers oftentimes the trees on the other bank. And then when that sun rises up, it's got that very unique, special kind of orange glow that you get in India, especially in the rural areas, because of the dust of the fields. And as that beautiful Varuna colored, saffron colored sun rises, the mist begins to dissipate, and the trees on the other bank become gradually visible, the river becomes visible, and the river there is very placid, very little rippling. And we walk out and we offer prayers to Mother Ganga, and we take a vow. And the Sankalpa, the beginning of the parikrama, we take a vow that is meant to empower and enhance our practice for this time. Right? Throughout the year, we may or may not be very nicely or well engaged, right? But this is one special week where we get special empowerment. And so we try to make the most of it. Because of the week before Mahaprabhu's appearance, all the holy places we're going to visit, take the blessings of the Dham and all its variety, and praying for the mercy and the strength of Mahaprabhu and his associates, our Guru Varga, right? And so it could be of two types. We vow things that we don't want to do, that are unfavorable for our bhakti, or we take a vow of things that we do want to do that will assist us in our bhakti, right? Actually, both assist us. But in other words, the anukul and the pratikul, things that are favorable and things that are unfavorable. So things that are unfavorable that we don't want to do, especially this month or this week, we don't want to criticize anybody. We don't want to have that mindset. We want to have the mindset of Mahaprabhu's associates, right? That mindset of love and compassion for all living beings. I mean, that's what we were hearing in the previous chapter. We didn't hear all of it, but Mahaprabhu came with the mood of compassion to deliver all fallen souls, and that those who live and abide in Navadvip Dham, there's no offense considered when chanting the names of Nitai and Gauranga. Right? If we take mercy of them and their holy names and our chanting of the Hare Krishna mantra, our practice of the limbs of bhakti becomes so accelerated, offenses fall away. So we want to engage in such a way that we cultivate the mindset of pure bhakti. Right? So whatever that is that you feel is an obstacle. For me, it's always been criticism. I just, don't let me criticize anybody, right? Don't let me engage in foolish, mundane talk. Don't let me, be attracted by anything that is unfavorable, right? I find so many things to try to make a vow. Now, you don't want to make a vow that you can't do. That's not good either. But there are many things we can, and especially when you are surrounded by devotees. Now, we're at our homes in the West, here and there, and of course we're not in that same environment, but at least for this time in class, once a day we try to do our service, and we are in Navadvip Dham within our mind and within our hearts. Right? Or this week I'm going to chant more, or I'm going to read a special amount, or something. In Navadvip, of course, the vows take a very, stronger and more obvious place in our heart. But let's try to do it as best we can. Now, so we're standing. Now we go into the water, up to our ankles, up to our knees, whatever. And we take a palm full of water, and we offer it back to Ganga Devi herself. The sun is now rising. It's visible across the way. Everything is beautiful. The early morning, the birds are singing. This really is, beautiful Navadvip. You don't see any wires and telephone poles and, power lines or anything like that. All you see is trees and the Ganga, and you hear the birds. Sometimes you hear cows lowing. It's a beautiful, beautiful sight. And we pray to Mother Ganga. We recite different astakams, and then we offer artik, and then we make our vow and offer the water back to Mother Ganga. Very beautiful. I don't have a copy of those prayers. They were usually led by senior devotees, often our Tirtha Maharaj. I haven't been to Navadvip in quite a few years, unfortunately for me. I've been in Vrindavan for many of these days. I'm deciding that next year I have to be there at this time. So then after that, we take bath, right? Walk out a little further. The water there is, again, still not too cold. And we walk out up to our waist, up to our chest, and then immerse ourselves, feeling blessed by the mercy of Ganga Devi, that she's accepted us there and purifying us. This is the water that Mahaprabhu and his associates sport in. Pastimes are there. This is such a sanctified place. And we're becoming purified inside and out, bathing in this water. Then we go back and take our clothing. We were in gumshoes before then, right? Put it on and we walk back to our mat. And then we go and we hear a nice class. Usually at this time we would hear more about Mahaprabhu and his appearance, his purposes, things like that. Tomorrow we begin to visit the pastime places. So today I wanted to speak on the fourth chapter, which follows the third being the distribution of love of God. And in this fourth chapter, we're going to hear about what Mahaprabhu himself came to experience. And here's some very amazing things stated by Krishnadas Kaviraj and by our Srila Prabhupada. And this is very important. I remember when I was first hearing this from Srila Narayan Maharaj, because like most devotees, I was appropriately attached to Mahaprabhu's mission of preaching, but was thinking that that was our primary and sole purpose in this world. And this is how I understood Mahaprabhu and what he had come to do and give, but there's more to it. And when I first heard Srila Narayan Maharaj speaking about this, I thought, what? I've never heard this. But actually, I had heard it, but it didn't sink in. And it's so clear directly in the words of Krishnadas Kaviraj and directly in the purports of Srila Prabhupada. So the conceptions are not different from what Srila Prabhupada gave us initially. They just fill it out more. Srila Prabhupada's filling it out. And when we have the appropriate eligibility, then this will enter our heart. And the two purposes, the internal and the external, they support each other, right? So, there's a few verses in the beginning of the chapter, and then he says, Krishnadas Kaviraj, I've given the essential meaning of the fourth verse. This incarnation descends to propagate the chanting of the holy name and spread love of God. And although this is true, this is but the external reason for the Lord's incarnation. Please hear one other reason, the confidential reason for the Lord's appearance. Confidential meaning it's not so obvious for everyone. And remember yesterday we were talking about Bhaktivinoda Thakur's article called the Gauranga Samaj. And those who appreciate and whom he considers followers of Sri Krishna Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, although followers with different levels of understanding, most people fall under the first two categories, where they see him as a a social reformer, and they honor him for that. Or they see him as a great devotee, the institutor, the founder of a religious movement. And it's more rare to see him as and understand him as the incarnation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna himself. But even seeing him as Krishna himself, as we heard yesterday, Krishna explains in Bhagavad Gita why he appears, right? Paritranaya sadhunam vinashanakshaduskratam dharma sangstarpanartaya sambhavami yuge yuge. Right? Protect devotees, destroy demoniac conditions and the demons, and to reestablish religious principles, right? So, Krishna says on the battlefield of Kurukshetra, that's why I come, right? And he says, although this is true, this is but the external reason for the Lord's incarnation. Please hear one other reason, the confidential reason for the Lord's appearance. Srila Prabhupada says, in the 3rd chapter, 4th verse, it has been clearly said that Lord Chaitanya appeared to distribute love of Krishna, right? Dharma samstarpanartaya, right? And the chanting of his transcendental holy name, Hare Krishna. That was the secondary purpose of Lord Chaitanya's appearance. The real reason is different, as we shall see in this chapter. The real reason, my goodness. Krishna's Kaviraj then says, the scriptures proclaim that Lord Krishna previously descended to take away the burden of the earth. Let me read this verse. Swayam Bhagavaneta Karma Nahi Bharaharan Stiti Karta Vishnu Kardena Jagat Palan. To take away this burden, however, is not the work of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The maintainer, Lord Vishnu, is the one who protects the universe. Remember when we were discussing Shiva Tattva, we were talking about the very special role of Mahavishnu. He's the one who creates and regulates the activities of this material world, including, he's the source of the different incarnations who distribute the Dharma, the religious principles, on the earth, and he's the one who protects devotional development and inhibits demons when things get out of hand. This is all his work, right? To create and to provide a facility for souls who are desiring to cross beyond the material realm into the spiritual, right? So to take away the burden, that's his work, right? Lord Vishnu is the one who protects the universe. But now he's talking about Krishna's appearance at the end of the Dwapara Yuga. The time to lift the burden of the world mixed with the time for Lord Krishna's incarnation. In other words, Lord Krishna, the original personality of Godhead, he has his time once in a day of Brahma when he will also appear. So, he is, of course, the source of Mahavishnu, but both those things came up at the same time. All right, it's the end of Dwapara Yuga. The demons have become very powerful. Lord Brahma came to pray to the bank of the milk ocean to Kshirodakshai Vishnu, please relieve the burden of the earth. You know, Mother Bhumi, the goddess of the earth, had made so many fervent prayers. So these things coincided. And Srila Prabhupada says, we have information from Bhagavad Gita that the Lord appears at particular intervals to adjust a time-worn spiritual culture. Time-worn. Time erodes, it wears things down. Right? The scientists talk about the laws of thermodynamics. Second law, that which is organized and orderly by the influence of time, unless there's the influence of an outside source, everything degrades, everything breaks down, right? So even spiritual culture gets worn down by time from Satya Yuga, right? Dwapara Yuga, Treta Yuga. Gradually, the qualities of Dharma erode till we get to Kali Yuga. So, the Lord appears at particular intervals to adjust a time-worn spiritual culture. Lord Sri Krishna appeared at the end of Dwapara Yuga to regenerate the spiritual culture of human society and also to manifest his transcendental pastimes. Vishnu is the authorized Lord who maintains the created cosmos, and he is also the principal deity who makes adjustments for improper administration in the cosmic creation. Right? What's improper administration? Hiranyakashipu taking over, changing everything, right? Ravan taking over. When demons run things, this is improper administration of the cosmic affairs. So, Lord Vishnu, Mahavishnu, he's generally in charge of that, right? It's from him the different incarnations appear to make the proper adjustments. Sri Krishna is the primeval Lord, and he appears not to make such administrative adjustments, but only to exhibit his transcendental pastimes, and thus attract the fallen souls back home, back to Godhead. However, the time for administrative rectification and the time for Lord Sri Krishna's appearance coincided at the end of Dwapara Yuga. Therefore, when Sri Krishna appeared, Vishnu, the Lord of Maintenance, also merged in him, because all the plenary portions and parts of the absolute personality of Godhead merge in him during his appearance. So all of his different expansions, they appear along with him. Right? And this goes to what we had heard many times, that even in Braj, when the demons are killed, it appears that Krishna himself, the original personality of Godhead, is doing it by his own sweet will, by his small lotus hands or feet. He's killing these different demons, but actually the ultimate killing is done by Mahavishnu within him. Right? Because Krishna, he's just engaged in eternal, sweet pastimes. So Krishna's Kaviraj says, when the complete Supreme Personality of Godhead descends, all other incarnations of the Lord meet together within him. Lord Narayan, the primary four expansions, the Chaturvyuha, right? Vasudev, Sankarshan, Pradyumna, and Aniruddha, Matsya, and the other Lila incarnations, the Druga avatars, and the Manvantar incarnations, and as many incarnations as there are, all descend in the body of Lord Krishna. In this way, the complete Supreme Godhead, Lord Krishna himself, appears. At that time, therefore, Lord Vishnu is present in the body of Lord Krishna, and Lord Krishna kills the demons through him. Right? And we don't need to be too bewildered by this, because after all, these incarnations are that same personality of Godhead, but they are forms that he manifests for different tasks and to relate with his devotees in different ways in which they desire to serve him. Right? They have the full power, but they're showing it in different ways, and the examples given like the moon. The moon is always full, but sometimes it shows itself as half or a quarter or a sliver. It's always full, but our perception of it is different. So these different incarnations manifest different qualities, prominently, even different features to attract and inspire devotees with various service moods. Lord Brahma says in the third canto that, "Oh, my Lord, you appear in these different forms specifically to give pleasure to your devotees who desire to worship you in particular ways. So, the killing of demons is but secondary work. Now he's going to explain the main reason for the Lord's incarnation. Okay, so this is a famous 2 verses. Prema rasa niryasa kodite asvadan ragamarga bhakti loke kodite pracharan rasika shekara krishna paramakaruna edui hetu hoite ichara udgama. The Lord's desire to appear was born from 2 reasons. He wanted to taste the sweet essence of the mellows of love of God, and he wanted to propagate devotional service in the world on the platform of spontaneous attraction. Thus he is known as supremely jubilant and as the most merciful of all. So now you see, we begin to see the relationship. 2 reasons. He himself wanted to taste the essence of the mellows of love of God as the devotees. And he wanted to propagate devotional service in the world on the platform of spontaneous attraction. Now, this also applies to Krishna. This verse applies to Mahaprabhu and to Krishna, because Krishna wanted to appear and taste the sweet mellows between himself and the inhabitants of Vrindavan. And he wanted to inspire in the hearts of the living entities in this world to themselves also become attracted to this very special kind of devotion. Ragmarg, right? The ragatmika moods of the inhabitants of Vrindavan. So, Srila Prabhupada says, during the period of Lord Krishna's appearance, the killing of the asuras or non-believers, such as Kamsa and Jarasandha, was done by Vishnu, who was within the person of Sri Krishna. Such apparent killing by Lord Sri Krishna was a matter of course as an incidental activity. But the real purpose of Lord Krishna's appearance was to stage a dramatic performance of his transcendental pastimes at Brajabhumi, thus exhibiting the highest limit of transcendental mellow in the exchanges of reciprocal love between the living entity and the Supreme Lord. So he's coming and manifesting his original, topmost eternal abode. That Goloka Vrindavan in the spiritual realm, manifesting in this world, Bhoma Vrindavan, they're non-different, but there's some speciality in the Vrindavan as he manifested here, where the pastimes take place, you could say, in more complete form. Because in Goloka Vrindavan, there is no birth of Krishna, there's no childhood pastimes directly, there are no demons, there's no extended separation where Krishna goes away, and yet, because the pastimes in Gokul Vrindavan, the localized, this Vrindavan of our universe, these pastimes do take place, but for the inhabitants of Vrindavan, there's no difference. So in Goloka Vrindavan, they have the conception. Oh, Krishna's definitely the son of Mother Jashoda. We saw him born. They remember the pastimes of him killing demons. They remember the pastimes of him leaving, going to Dwarka. This is all described in Gopal Champu. So it's very, very interesting. So he wants to stage and show the inhabitants of this world the perfected, highest abode in the spiritual realm, the highest limit of transcendental mellow in the exchanges of reciprocal love between the living entity and the Supreme Lord. That's the real purpose, Srila Prabhupada says, of Krishna's appearance. These reciprocal exchanges of mellows are called Rag Bhakti, or devotional service to the Lord in transcendental rapture. Lord Sri Krishna wants to make known to all the conditioned souls that he is more attracted by Rag Bhakti than vidhi bhakti or devotional service under scheduled regulations. It is said in the Vedas, Raso vai saha. The absolute truth is the reservoir for all kinds of reciprocal exchanges of loving sentiments. He is also causelessly merciful. And he wants to bestow upon us this privilege of rag bhakti. Thus he appeared as his own internal energy. He was not forced to appear by any extraneous force. So now we're getting this hint. And the relationship between Krishna's appearance at the end of the Dwapara Yuga with Radha and Lalita and Vishaka and the gopis and Mother Yashoda and Nanda Maharaj and their friends and his dear cowherd boys and the cows and the deer, all of that incredible display of pastimes, and the relationship between that and his sequential appearance as Sri Krishna Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So now Krishna's Kaviraj is giving verses speaking in Krishna's voice. Aishvarya Gyanate Sabha Jagat Mishrita Aishvarya Stitila Preme Nahimoda Prita. All the universe is filled with the conception of my majesty. But love weakened by that sense of majesty does not satisfy me. That's an amazing statement. Because for the most part, almost everyone, including devotees of Radha and Krishna, they appreciate and aspire and are very happy and comfortable in worshiping in that mood of majesty. Right? And in fact, Srila Prabhupada did say in these early days, he said, yes, we're worshiping Radha and Krishna, but we're worshiping them in the mood of Lakshmi Narayan. That in our beginning stages, we should never forget that this is the Supreme Lord. We should meditate and know his opulences to protect us from offense, misconception, and to keep us on the straight and narrow of Vaidhi Bhakti, because it's Vaidhi Bhakti that will purify our anarthas and obstacles to our devotion and gradually awaken taste for the pure name. But ultimately, we want to progress. We have to know this. We want to progress into Rag Marg, right? So, and Krishna himself is saying that devotion that only comes up to rules and regulations, it's weak. Love, it weakens the sense of love. Right? So he goes on to say, Amare Ishvara Mane Apanakehina Tada Preme Vasha Ame Nahayi Adina. If one regards me as the Supreme Lord and himself as a subordinate, I do not become subservient to his love, nor can it control me. Right? That control is not there. This is very deep. He says, in whatever transcendental mellow my devotee worships me, I reciprocate with him. That is my natural behavior. What does Srila Prabhupada say? He says, the Lord by his inherent nature reveals himself before his devotees according to their inherent devotional service. The Vrindavan pastimes demonstrated that although generally people worship God with reverence, the Lord is more pleased when a devotee thinks of him as his pet son, personal friend, or most dear fiancé, and renders service unto him with such natural affection. The Lord becomes a subordinate object of love in such transcendental relationships. Such pure love of Godhead is unadulterated by any tinge of superfluous non-devotional desires. and is not mixed with any sort of fruit of action or empirical philosophical speculation. It is pure and natural love of Godhead, spontaneously aroused in the absolute stage. This devotional service is executed in a favorable atmosphere, freed from material affection. So in that, Srila Prabhupada gives a purport to Rupa Goswami's defining verse on bhakti, Anya bilashita shunyam jnana karmadyanavritam anukulyena krishna anushilanam bhakti uttama. Right? So when Rupa Goswami gives that verse, he's talking about this kind of bhakti. The bhakti free of any other consideration than giving Krishna the ultimate happiness, right? Everything done, executing Krishna, service to Krishna in the most favorable way. In a mood untainted by any personal or extraneous desire, anyabhilashita, shunya, not covered by reward-seeking activity or philosophical speculation or impersonal considerations or yogic siddhis or, astrology or anything, right? Jnana karmadyanavritam, not covered by any of that. It's not that we don't do work or we don't have knowledge, but no work and knowledge that covers this supreme, most intimate conception of Krishna and an intimate, loving relationship with him. Right? Anukulyena. Krishna, what does it mean to do things in a mood favorable for Krishna? In a mood that he ultimately wants. And in this chapter, he's going to explain that really what I want is I want to be with my friends who wrestle with me, who challenge me, who criticize me, sometimes joke with me, sometimes defeat me. I want to be with my mother and father who may even feel the need to chastise me, who love me like their son without any condition, have no idea that I'm God, or ultimately, I want to be with my beloved Brajadevis. And that he's going to explain that more. That's the meaning. That's the highest bhakti. And he'll reciprocate in whatever way. Yayatam mam prapadyante, right? Oh, that's the next verse. Yayatam mam prapadyante tam sataiva bhajam yaham mama vartmanu vartante manusya partha sarvashaha. In whatever way my devotees surrender unto me, I reward him accordingly. Everyone follows in my path, or follows my path in all respects, O son of Prita. Prabhupada explains that this is Krishna's 11th verse in the 4th chapter of Bhagavad Gita. Oftentimes that verse is understood from the perspective of Vaidhi Bhakti. The better you perform your bhakti practices, the more Krishna will reciprocate. But in a deeper way, it means in whatever way that you want to serve and relate with me, I will reciprocate with that. We have free will, right? How do you want to serve me? Do you want to serve me in Vaikuntha? Right? You want to be one of those four-armed forms and serve me in that grand and splendorous place? All right. And they're fully satisfied. They love that. When Gopakumar got to Vaikuntha, the associates there said, why are you dressed like this ragged cowherd boy? You only got 2 arms. How can you serve the Lord with only 2 arms? Right? How can you give him pleasure dressed like that? Give up this idea of, cowherd boy. Be with us. They love it. And that for them, that's the highest. And others in different realms of service, they're all satisfied. And Krishna will reciprocate with them. But then he says, Krishna is speaking again, if one cherishes pure loving devotion to me, thinking of me as his son, his friend, or his beloved, regarding himself as great, and considering me his equal or inferior, I become subordinate to him. Oh. So, Srila Prabhupada gives a fairly long purport here. And he says, and I want to read Srila Prabhupada's purports because sometimes these points about Mahaprabhu's inner reason and actually the real nature of the bhakti that he came to give, and thus our Srila Prabhupada came to give, and his Guru Maharaj, Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Prabhupada came to give, what Bhaktivinoda Thakur came to give, we kind of miss it. We miss it. So, Srila Prabhupada says about that, about Krishna saying, I become subordinate to one who sees me as a son or friend or beloved. He says, in Chaitanya Charitamrita, 3 kinds of devotional service are described. Namely, bhakti, ordinary devotional service, Shuddha bhakti, pure devotional service, and vidha bhakti, mixed devotional service. When devotional service is executed with some material purpose involving fruitive activities, mental speculation, or mystic yoga, it is called mixed or adulterated devotional service, right? Jnana Mishra Bhakti, Karma Mishra Bhakti, right? Besides Bhakti Yoga, Bhagavad Gita also describes Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga, and Dhyana Yoga. Yoga means linking with the Supreme Lord, which is possible only through devotion. Fruitive activities ending in devotional service, philosophical speculation ending in devotional service, and the practice of mysticism ending in devotional service are known respectively as Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga, and Dhyana Yoga. But such devotional service is adulterated by the 3 kinds of material activities. And in his conversations with Ramananda Roy at the Godavari, this is such a fundamental chapter in Adi Lila, chapter 8, where everything that Mahaprabhu is teaching, we understand it through his conversation with Ramananda Roy. And Ramananda Roy goes through these different stages of mixed and inferior goals and inferior processes. Mahaprabhu wanted to know what's the highest objective, the best thing, the highest goal, and what's the means to achieve it. And he goes through all these different stages, and at every stage, Mahaprabhu says, no, it's external. I want to know about the activities of the pure soul in the highest realm that's going to give Krishna and that living entity the greatest happiness and pleasure. So Srila Prabhupada goes on, for those grossly engaged in identifying the body as the self, pious activity or karma yoga is recommended. So if you have the body, you think you're that, and you're pretty attached, all right, do pious activity, varnashrama, that's what Ramananda Roy said in the beginning, varnashrama chavata purushena param, right? Or karma yoga, right? Do that. And then he recommended that. And Mahaprabhu says, no, this is external. For those who identify the mind with the self, philosophical speculation or jnana yoga is recommended. Right? And he said, no, don't want that bhakti mixed with jnana either. But devotees standing on the spiritual platform have no need of such material conceptions of adulterated devotion. Adulterated devotional service does not directly aim for love of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Therefore, service performed strictly in conformity with the revealed scriptures is better than such vidha bhakti because it is free from all kinds of material contamination. It is executed in Krishna consciousness solely to please the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Now, sometimes we hear the word bhakti applied to mixed devotional service, and sometimes we hear it in not directly meaning that. But there is a kind of bhakti that's performed for these material benefits. This is described in the Madhurya Kadambini. And in the explanations of Ramananda Roy Samvad, that those who want material things in this world, promotion of the heavenly planets, advancement on this planet, wealth, high status, beauty, whatever it is, you perform varnashram, which regulates your activities, and you're performing a semblance of bhakti. You may be engaged in the worship of the demigods and Lord Vishnu. But the bhakti, that which is being described as bhakti, that those so-called regulative performances and sacrifices and worship of Lord Vishnu, even the chanting of hymns in the holy name, if it's done strictly for material purposes, it's not the same bhakti. Shuddha bhakti manifests herself in a special form to provide material benefits because she's merciful. And in his description in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, Bhaktivinoda Thakur explains the relationship between Varnashram and Vaidhi Bhakti. That Varnashram is basically meant for material prosperity, but the underlying organization and purpose of it is to bring people in touch with bhakti, however mixed it may be. But by that gradual mixing and association with the principles of bhakti, one may develop a special kind of sukriti, or spiritual pious merit, which will make one gradually qualified to begin real bhakti, right? So, those who are spontaneously devoted to the Lord and have no aims for material gain are called attracted devotees. They are spontaneously attracted to the service of the Lord, and they follow in the footsteps of self-realized souls. Their pure devotion, Shuddha Bhakti, manifested from pure love of Godhead, surpasses the regulative principles of the authoritative scriptures. Sometimes loving ecstasy transcends regulative principles. Such ecstasy, however, is completely on the spiritual platform and cannot be imitated. The regulative principles help ordinary devotees rise to the stage of perfect love of Godhead. Pure love for Krishna is the perfection of pure devotion. And pure devotional service is identical with spontaneous devotional service. Flawless execution of regulative principles is exhibited in the Vaikuntha planets. By strictly executing these principles, one can be elevated to the Vaikuntha planets. But spontaneous, pure loving service is found in Krishna Loka alone. So here we understand Vaidhi Bhakti in another way. Vaidhi Bhakti can be the platform and stepping stone to spontaneous devotional service. But if you stick to just Vaidhi Bhakti alone, without the desire or the understanding of that which is beyond it, then you achieve Vaikuntha. But what Mahaprabhu wanted to teach us was the beauty and the glory of the nature of the love of the Brajbasis. Very subtle, very high. So, he goes on speaking, Krishna's Kaviraj, Krishna speaking. Devotional service rendered to me by living beings revives their eternal life. Oh wait, he's quoting Srimad Bhagavatam, 82nd chapter, when Krishna met the gopis at Kurukshetra. Mahi bhaktir hi bhutanam amrita vaya kalpate dishtya yadasin mat sneho bhavatinam madapana. Devotional service rendered to me by the living beings revives their eternal life. O my dear damsels of Braj, your affection for me is your good fortune, for it is the only means by which you have attained my favor. Srila Prabhupada says, pure devotional service is represented in the activities of the residents of Brajabhumi, Vrindavan. During a solar eclipse, the Lord came from Dwarka and met the inhabitants of Vrindavan at Samantapanchak. The meeting was intensely painful for the damsels of Brajabhumi because Lord Krishna apparently left them to reside at Dwarka. But the Lord obligingly acknowledged the pure devotional service of the damsels of Braj by speaking this verse. Right? So, these pastimes of Krishna also, even the pastimes in Dwarka, which are not on the same level as the pastimes in Brajabhumi, they are there in the Bhagavatam so that those who are deeply realized in the subject matter can reveal the lessons in those pastimes and the spiritually subtle distinction between the love of the inhabitants of Dwarka and the love of the inhabitants in Vrindavan. The difference between the queens and the gopis, the difference between Vasudeva and Devaki and Mother Jashoda and Nanda Maharaj, the difference between persons like Arjun and Satyaki and others, and Sridham, Subal, Madhumangal, even Uddhava in Dwarka. So, now he goes on, speaking again as Krishna. Mattamore putta bhave korena bandhana attihina jnane kore lalana palana. Sometimes mother binds me as her son. She nourishes and protects me, thinking me utterly helpless. My friends climb on my shoulders in pure friendship, saying, "What kind of big man are you? You and I are equal." If my beloved consort reproaches me in a sulky mood, that steals my mind from the reverent hymns of the Vedas. I'm going to read that. Priya jadi mana kori, koreye bhartsana, Veda stuti hoite hare, sehi mora mana. If my beloved consort reproaches me in a sulky mood, mana kori, sulking. Beautiful translation. That steals my mind from the reverent hymns of the Vedas. That mood of annoyance and being cross with Krishna for some reason. Srila Prabhupada gives a long purport. I guess I'll read this purport and that will be pretty much the end. Wait, I'm going to read a few verses and then go back. E Shura Bhakti Lana Korimu Avatar Koriba Vivida Vita Adbhuta Vihar. Taking these pure devotees with me, I shall descend and sport in various wonderful ways, unknown even in Vaikuntha. I shall broadcast such pastimes by which even I am amazed. So Prabhupada says in that, Lord Krishna, in the form of Lord Chaitanya, educates his devotees to develop progressively to the stage of pure devotional service. Right. Understand what is our ultimate goal, not to be stuck. Like Srila Prabhupada said, we have to progress from the Kanishta stage to the Madhyam, and then if we take guidance from Uttam Adhikaris on that Madhyam stage, we can get to this final stage. Because even Madhyam, it has the elements of Raganuga, it's gradually developing. There is some spontaneity. Shuddhanam is being chanted, but the full-blown nature of that Rag Marg is only tasted in Bhav when we begin to awaken our understanding of our spiritual identity and our our spiritual, eternal relationship and service to Krishna and his devotees. So, Lord Krishna, in the form of Lord Chaitanya, educates his devotees to develop progressively to the stage of pure devotional service. Thus, he appears periodically as a devotee to take part in various wonderful activities depicted in his sublime philosophy and teachings. There are innumerable Vaikuntha planets in the spiritual sky, and in all of them the Lord accepts the service rendered by his eternal associates in a reverential mood. Therefore, Lord Sri Krishna presents his most confidential pastimes as he enjoys them in his transcendental realm. Such pastimes are so attractive that they attract even the Lord, and thus he relishes them in the form of Lord Chaitanya. And we're going to hear that. When Krishna is relishing his pastimes with the gopis, he becomes astonished by their experience, their devotion, their happiness, and bewildered. What is it they see? What are they feeling? What is it like? Being with them makes him want to taste what they're tasting. Right? And so, Lord Chaitanya. So these are intertwined, right? And Mahaprabhu is teaching, he's come to teach this. If you want to be on the Vaikuntha level, okay. If you want to stay in Dwarka, be there instead, okay. If you want to be with Lord Ram, you want to be a follower of Hanuman, be a monkey, that's all glorious and wonderful. But Krishna himself, the original personality of Godhead, he resides in Vrindavan. And this is where he gets his greatest pleasure and happiness. So pure devotion means anukulyena krishnanushilanam, to be in that mood most favorable for Krishna, for the benefit of Krishna, right? For his deepest kind of happiness. This is Vrindavan. He says, the influence of Yogamaya will inspire the gopis with the sentiment that I am their paramour. And Srila Prabhupada explains that Yogamaya is the name of the internal potency that makes the Lord forget himself and become an object of love for his pure devotees in different transcendental mellows. This Yogamaya potency creates a spiritual sentiment in the minds of the damsels of Braj, by which they think of Lord Krishna as their paramour. This sentiment is never to be compared to mundane, illicit sexual love. It has nothing to do with sexual psychology, although the pure love of such devotees seems to be sexual. One should know for certain that nothing can exist in this cosmic manifestation that has no real counterpart in the spiritual field. All material manifestations are emanations of the transcendence. The erotic principles of amorous love reflected in mixed material values are perverted reflections of the reality of spirit. But one cannot understand the reality unless this one is sufficiently educated in the spiritual science. That's why we go through these different stages. Vaidhi Bhakti, why it's so important, why we study Sambandha Tattva, why we try to deeply understand what is Abhideya, what is the practice, what is right, what is wrong, and why we study Prayojana, the ultimate objective, and understand these different objectives, which are all real, all the Brahman realization, that's real. Brahmajyoti, merging into that, that's real. Paramatma, meditating on the Lord in the heart, that's real. But what are the limitations of these? And then to understand Bhagavan and to understand all the different forms he has and the different ways in which one may reciprocate with him. And that's why we get this appreciation of Krishna Lila in Vrindavan. And ultimately, that topmost way to relate and serve Krishna as the Brajadevis do, and ultimately in the mood of Rupanugas, the followers of Rupa Goswami who aspire to serve in Manjari Bhav, assisting Srimati Radhika in her pastimes of giving Krishna pleasure. Right? So, some big purports here. Okay. I'm going to read this purport. In the spiritual sky, the Vaikuntha planets are predominated by Narayan. His devotees have the same features he does, and the exchange of devotion there is on the platform of reverence. But above all these Vaikuntha planets is Goloka, or Krishna Loka, where the original personality of Godhead, Krishna, fully manifests his pleasure potency in free loving affairs. Well, Srila Prabhupada explained this is the most full pastimes of the Lord, the most full expressions and exchanges of love. Since the devotees in the material world know almost nothing about these affairs, the Lord desires to show these affairs to them. In Goloka Vrindavan, there is an exchange of love known as Parakiya Ras. It is something like the attraction of a married woman for a man other than her husband. In the material world, this sort of relationship is most abominable because it is a perverted reflection of the Parakiya Ras in the spiritual world, where it is the highest kind of loving affair. Because in this world, it's a transgression of religious principles that are meant to purify the mind and heart from selfish material desire and dedicate ourselves to the service, loving service of the Lord. So we need the restrictions and purificatory practices of Vaidhi Bhakti to remove us from the compunction to follow the injunctions of the false ego and make everything about us, self-centered material sense gratification. So in this world, we know what Parakiya is, but it's just licentious, unrestricted, selfish sense gratification. Right? But in the spiritual world, it's the highest because it reflects that love is expressed in such a way that everything is given up for the happiness of the Lord. Right? Even one's reputation, one's so-called chastity, all of that is just dedicated to Krishna. Right? And so Yogamaya sets up this whole environment by which this can be shown, that the gopis will be able to give up everything for Krishna. But there's no inebriety, no impurity in that. You can read Gopal Champu and get really amazing insight into that psychology. Because as long as we're stuck in the material consciousness, it's difficult. And oftentimes people think that they can understand Parakiya Ras by imitating it or experiencing it in this world. No. So, he's saying that the Parakiya Ras, the highest kind of loving affair, such feelings between the devotee and the Lord are presented by the influence of Yogamaya, the pure internal energy, right? Bhagavad Gita states that devotees of the highest grade are under the care of Daivamaya or Yogamaya. Mahatmanas tumam parta daivim prakritim ashrita. 9:13, Bhagavad Gita. Those who are actually great souls are fully absorbed in Krishna consciousness, always engaged in the service of the Lord. They are under the care of Daivi Prakriti or Yogamaya. Yogamaya creates a situation in which the devotee is prepared to transgress all regulative principles simply to love Krishna. A devotee naturally does not like to transgress the laws of reverence for the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but by the influence of Yogamaya, he is prepared to do anything to love the Supreme Lord better. So here we get an idea of one of the reasons for the parakya, to show that the gopis who are the most chaste, most pure, they'll give up even the rules of society and their reputation and everything else to give pleasure to Krishna. And of course, just like when the Vedic Brahmanas, the wives of the mature Brahmanas, said, we've given up everything for you, we can't go back now because we've given up everything, our husbands will reject us. And Krishna says, no, they will actually revere you, because by his Yogamaya potency, these most strict and religiously regulated ladies would have been cast out and shunned, but by his Yogamaya potency, their husbands came to the realization that actually our wives have understood the highest principle of religiosity, and they are so much greater than us. Right? And so they served and worshiped their wives from that point on. Those under the spell of the material energy cannot at all appreciate the activities of Yogamaya, for a conditioned soul can hardly understand the pure reciprocation between the Lord and his devotee. But by executing devotional service under the regulative principles, one can become very highly elevated and then begin to appreciate the dealings of pure love under the management of Yogamaya. Okay, so this purport goes on quite a bit, where Srila Prabhupada is explaining clearly what Krishna's pastimes, how they were actually, although they appear to be very similar to those of this material world, they're acting under a completely different energy and very completely different experience. So we'll have to stop here. Tomorrow we'll begin the parikram. I'll have to look and see where the parties are going, or whether we'll go in another way. I'm not sure. I'll have to see. But tomorrow we'll begin. Nityananda may be able to find a map to show us where these different things are. I don't know, we were talking about it yesterday. Anyway, so thank you all. Let me close this little lecture here. Here we go.